Welcome to the community study. And we've got to acknowledge something right off the bat. It's a little bit weird to do a study on community when you're already surrounded by people. We get it. It's a little like preaching to the choir. But as someone who has in fact preached to the choir and to the worship team, to the brand new Christian, to the lifelong follower of Jesus, to the atheist who came in with family or friends, and the person who stumbled in a daze that's still holding on from Saturday, there is a difference between talking about community and real community. And so this study, we're going to take a look at community, but it's probably good if we start with a discussion question first. So here's your first discussion question. What does the word community mean to you? Honestly, the word community sounds a little, think about it. You often only see the word community in a public setting when it's used for things like a community center or in a community information session or a community meeting. So the word community can sound a little bit like stale bagels and bad coffee and forced conversation with people who have the time, energy, and passion to attend a zoning meeting. Now, community itself doesn't have to mean that. And so I don't think that the idea of community has been tried and found wanting. It's that it's often been tried badly and found dissatisfying when it's forced or when it's conscripted. But on the other hand, if the type of community we were talking about was hanging out with interesting people and laughing and telling jokes and entering into the drama of other people's lives, weeping with them and celebrating with them and sharing good food and encouraging and being encouraged, well, you gotta admit, that sounds a lot better than stale bagels and zoning issues. Those types of moments, they're made up of lots of different types of connections. So best friends and casual and consistent connections. And actually, best friends is a good place to start. Here's a discussion question for you. Who has been one of your best friends, and what is one of your favorite memories with them? It's worthwhile to think about how you became friends with your best friend and where that started. But anyway, moving on, there's also consistent friendships, people that you see regularly. But then there's another type of friendship as well, the casual kind. The people that you talk with, but they're a looser connection. These are the types of people that are a little bit more unexpected for you to be friends with. They're the ones who help you when you say, hey, does anybody know a good mechanic? And they point you in the right direction. Or they're the ones that you see at church in the hallways that you don't know their name, but then you get to talking and you discover a whole world that you didn't know anything about. And actually, this is a good discussion question too. So take a minute and discuss. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone you had a casual connection with, they became significant, whether it was help or fun, or they offered a different perspective or something like that? So these are the types of connections that you already have. But before we go any further, I want to tell you about the Harvard study of adult development. And I know that with a title like that, it sounds like we just dove headfirst into zoning issues. And trust me, we didn't, because the study is sometimes referred to by another name. It's sometimes called the Harvard Happiness Study. Now, it began in 1938. And it's still going today. And they have studied more than 2,000 people. Every 2 years, each participant gets a lengthy questionnaire. Every 5 years, they get complete health records from their doctor sent in to the Harvard Adult Study. And every 15 years or so, there's a face-to-face meeting. The whole point of the study is to find out about people in real time, not by looking backwards, but by looking at things as they happen and recording them. Because memory can be tricky. When we remember something, we actually tend to remember the last time we remembered it and not when it happened the first time. And that's one of the ways that memory changes over time. So this study was tracking people in real time, and then they can go back and take a look at some of the answers. Answers to questions that were great questions. Here's some samples. Who would you call if you woke up scared in the middle of the night? Or who encourages you to try new things, to take chances, to pursue your life goals? And who can you ask for advice and trust what they say? Actually, these questions are so good that it's probably worth taking a minute to think about. So you don't have to answer it, but why don't you take a minute and write down the answers in your workbook. Well, welcome back, and thank you for taking the time to write those down. You don't have to share that with anyone, but you certainly can. But after all this research, after 85 years, are you ready for what they found when they go back and they study the answers and the results? They found that it's not good for humans to be alone. Boy, does that sound like a paraphrase of Genesis 2, verse 18. And don't you love that? More than 85 years of study, multiple salaries, somewhere in the range of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And it all comes back to something God said in the garden. Boy, I think they probably could have saved a whole lot of money just looking at what the Bible says. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing a community study. We want to look at what the Bible says about community and how God values it, why God values it, how God has set things up for us, and how we fall short, and what to do when we fall short. All of this is really important, and important to community. But before we continue with that, we want to take a look at a couple of other studies that are out there that show some of the specific benefits of community. There was one study that happened across 5 different geographic locations, places as different as Finland and a town in Georgia. And across all of these 5 different locations, they found that people with more social connections were less likely to die at any age. Now, another study by someone named Julianne Holt-Lundstad and her colleagues, it finished up in 2010, and it found that people with a greater number of connections were 50% less likely to die at any age. To put it a different way, isolation is about as likely to kill someone as smoking cigarettes is. It's good for your health to have friends and to have community. The Holt-Lundstad study basically agrees with what the writer of Proverbs says. One who has isolated himself seeks his own desires. He rejects all sound judgment. All sound judgment includes wisdom that came from this study. But yes, if we take all of these things together, that's right, if we do community well, you could live longer. You didn't know it when you started it, but this course could make you healthier. And you didn't even have to lift one weight. Now, I know, for all my introvert friends who are getting a little anxious, here's the thing. This is not actually about getting people to enjoy crowds. It's actually about the connections that we have and the connections that we need and the connections that we make with others. It's about the different types of connections that we need as humans and that we are uniquely positioned to experience as part of the church. And we are uniquely situated to provide to others. Now, This isn't a brand new concept. Like we said, some of the stuff that they found in these studies goes all the way back to the beginning in Genesis chapter 2. But at this point in time in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 2, God is in the process of creating everything. In Genesis 1, God said that everything He made is good. But in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, God says it's not good for man to be alone. And then He says what He's going to do. He's going to make a companion, another person. And if I were telling the story, I would jump directly from Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 to verse 21, and God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and He made Eve. That's a paraphrase, by the way. But that's not what God did in Genesis chapter 2. God did something else instead. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 19, He gets Adam to name things. That's right. God knows that Adam needs an Eve. He knows that it's not good for Adam to be alone, and so He immediately brings every living creature to Adam to be named before making Eve. Why would God do that? I think it's because God knew it wasn't good for humans to be alone. But Adam didn't know it yet, and he needed to discover it. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you're a parent, and if you know your child needs to drink water, you might tell them to drink more water. What do kids do? Sometimes when you tell them drink some more water, they look at you and say, "No!" So you've got two options. You force them to drink the water, "Thou shalt drink the water," or "Thou shalt sit in timeout until thou dost." Or you let them discover the need for themselves until they come to you and say, "I'm thirsty," and then you offer them the water that you know they need. And I think that this is what God does with Adam. He says, Adam is alone and this isn't good, so let's help Adam figure it out. So God does help him figure it out. And that's why we have verses 19 and verses 20 in Genesis chapter 2. Now, the thing is, I think we're all pretty bad at knowing our need until life happens. The truth is, there are things that we can do, reach out to people around us, but when it comes down to it, people are actually really terrible at predicting how beneficial it is to connect with other people and how good it is. We're kind of just like Adam. Let me tell you about another study. This one was done by the University of Chicago. I call it the train study. The University of Chicago asked people to guess what they would prefer during a train ride: talking to others or keeping to themselves. And of course, the overwhelming response was, everybody all together, say it at the same time, keeping to themselves. Now, of course, you'll notice that there's no difference between introverts and extroverts. It didn't really make a difference if somebody was an introvert or an extrovert. The overwhelming majority answered the same way. Talking with strangers is awkward. I get that. So in order to test the actual results, they split the group in half. They asked one group to keep to themselves, and they asked another group to intentionally connect with a stranger who was close by on the train. Are you ready for this? Here's the results of the study. The group that intentionally connected with a stranger rated the experience as positive and rated their commute as better than usual. It's the exact opposite of what the overwhelming prediction was. We humans are so bad at predicting our needs and desires for connection, at predicting how things are going to be, whether it's awkward or not, that even though I've referenced a study that was conducted by the University of Chicago, you might still disagree with the results of the study, like, no, probably they only had weird people take part in the study. I bet you they all like talking zoning laws and eating stale bagels. Or you said, oh, good for them, but I ain't doing it. I actually asked the question, I mentioned the study to a couple of people in the staff, and that was pretty much the response that I got. But this is actually really good for discussion question number 4. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we predict that it's going to be so bad? You know, people can be messy. It can be awkward. It probably won't be, or it'll probably be mostly positive with a couple of awkward spots, but it's a funny thing. You and I, for all of our effort to appear normal, we're awkward too. We have moments when we run out of words or ideas. I have a particular glitch where I'll forget the name of a person I've known for years, right when I go to use their name. I could tell you everything else about them, including how long I've known them. It's just the name that's gone. I had a friend once, the only thing I could remember when I went to introduce him was his Instagram name. So sometimes it's just we have glitches. But there can also be insecurity about ourselves. Like, what happens if I do or say something and could look dumb? What if they forget my name, or I forget theirs, or worse, what if they like something that I don't like? What happens if there's a pause in the conversation, or it doesn't flow really easily? And all these things pile up as fears. And one of the obstacles that we might have is that we want perfect in ourselves and others, but community is built with imperfect people. And that means that it's built with my weirdness and your weirdness and with their weirdness. It means that it's built in the pauses of the conversation and the resuming. It's built in the weird flow and in the resuming. It's in the differences that we have. Community. I was a welder once, and it was a great job. I loved it. Everything fit into tables that we called jigs. And every piece of metal was built to be the exact same. And if it wasn't, we'd hit it with a hammer until it was. That worked great for when you were mad, by the way. I loved that job. Everything was super precise. But community, with the close friendships, with the consistent friendships, with the casual friendships, they're not cold metal designed to be perfect and hammered into perfection. Nah. Community is grown, not made. It isn't perfect. And it takes time to grow. It's got knots and weird branches. It's organic, and it takes time to grow organic things. So, years ago, somebody asked a wise person, when's the best time to plant a tree? Person thought, and he answered and said, probably about 20 years ago. But the second best time to plant a tree is right now. Building community, real community with laughter and friendships is a lot like planting trees. The best time to build community is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And I know it can be a little risky. The truth is, most of us know how to start a conversation with somebody, but it feels risky. So, sometimes we just need to take the risk. But just like when you're planting a tree or gardening or farming, there are some things that we can do that help create the best possible opportunity for things to grow and grow with health. So we're going to look at that in the coming weeks. But before we end this week and before we continue on, I want to get you to do 2 assessments on yourself and on your friendships and your relationships and on your community. When we use GPS on our phones, one of the things that we need to have turned on is location services, because you can't figure out where you want to go if you don't know where you are. So these 2 assessments are designed to help you see where you are right now, at least in terms of the friendships that you have, and the friendships that you kind of help as well. So take some time and answer the following questions. They're written down in your workbook. Here are the question. Who can I rely on for? And then it lists a couple of categories. Who can I rely on for protection and safety, for growth and learning, for confidentiality and care, for sharing experiences and reminding me of who I am, for practical help, and for fun, relaxing, and celebrating. And once you've sort of written down some of those answers, you can turn the question around and ask, who can rely on me for protection and safety, for growth and learning, for confidentiality and care, for sharing experiences and reminding them of who they are, for practical help and for fun, for relaxing and celebrating?